G'day and welcome to Foord Offroad. This time we're at Lewis's shed, working on Lewis's Hilux, and we're going to show you all how to replace a clutch. So let's get into that. First thing you have to do before playing around with anything is disconnect the battery. Otherwise, when you're under there, you're going to be trying to get the starter motor off, your spanner's going to arc out against something, and you're going to shoot yourself.
And this isn't bad being 12, but I tell you, when 24 volt arcs out, then you know all about it.
So just disconnect it and you won't have an issue. So this is the clutch that we're putting in Lewis's Hilux, heavy duty one from Clutch Industries. New thrust bearing, new spigot bearing, and clutch plate alignment tool, which is very handy.
And a new clutch plate. That's what does all the...
Gets all 74 horsepower to the back wheels.
Come on, 75. And then we have the heavy bit, but it's all wrapped up, so we're not going to unwrap it too much.
Before we start undoing things underneath, got to take the gear stick surrounds off and pull the gear sticks out. Just unscrew the tops of them. And then the ones with the vinyl floors are a pain in the ass, ones with consoles are good. Got to peel back the vinyl floor and there's some bolts holding the metal bit around there that you just have to undo. And now that is off, you got to pull both gear sticks out. So they both got little rubber boots. Just pull them up. You just push down and twist. Just like that, and it pops out.
I've never done that before. That's so much easier than undoing those 4 bolts.
These ones have a circlip that you can just get with a screwdriver. Can't put it back in with a screwdriver, but you can. It doesn't matter what gear selection the full drive gear sticks in when you pull it out. First thing, take the front drive shaft out and take the rear drive shaft out. There's just a heap of, they're all 14mm bolts, 4 around each flange. That's one drive shaft out. How you going with the back one?
Almost out. Just got to undo some more center bearing bolt. Make it look like I'm helping.
So underneath on the cross member there's 4 12mm bolts up in there that attach the mount to the cross member. So undo those. Lots of dirt in the eyes. Fucking Foord, it's good for you.
And especially after you've been four-wheel driving and it's rusty.
Yeah, if it's full of mud, it makes it a lot harder. Start undoing all the 17mm bolts around the bell housing. So there's one poking through the back that holds the bracket for the slave cylinder. It can be pretty tight. It also holds, I think this one, yeah, this one also holds is also the bottom bolt for the starter motor. This earth wire off the back of the gearbox. Don't forget to put it back on. It's quite easily forgettable.
Your car will blow up.
All of the bottom bell housing bolts and the drive shafts and everything out. Going to drop the gearbox down enough so we can get access to the top bolts and also unplug all the electrical plugs on top of the gearbox. So what you should have is one on the speed sensor, one on the reverse thing, and there's another one on this side, and then you've got the gearbox and transfer case breather lines, and you got to pull all that off. There's a couple of clips on the top. Got the wiring all hanging down. There's just a couple of bolts left up the top of the bell housing, one on the top of the starter motor, 2 up the top, and I think there's one on the other side. So how you get those easily is with a really long extension and a uni joint on the end, so you don't have to try and fight with the tunnel to get your hand in there. Just poke this up and undo it. You think it is? So we have everything unbolted, all the bell housing bolts, all the wiring, everything. Got one jack under the middle, one jack under the transfer case, because when you pull it backwards it's going to want to tip to the passenger side because more weight on the gearbox on that side. So you're going to pull it back, jack it up so it's kind of level, like not so the gearbox level, but so it's level with the back of the engine because it's got to pull away straight. So jack it up to that point, and then you kind of got to wiggle it, and it's got some dowels that point out from the block that'll kind of lock it in place. Jiggle it around, get a screwdriver in there and lever if you have to. When it comes out, it is gonna be heavy. Just be really careful. If it starts to fall, just get out of the way. Don't let it fall on you because it'll hurt. Just easily and slowly pull it backwards and down on the ground, being really careful. This is a lot easier, like a lot easier on a hoist with a gearbox stand, but it is possible on jacks. And this is, if you're doing it in your garage, this is how you're gonna be doing it. So this is how we're showing you to do it. Just, you gotta be safe. Don't forget to put this piece back in, otherwise when you're smashing bog holes your gearbox will fill up with mud. So moving backwards, make sure your jacks move back at the same time as well. Moving backwards, going down. Alright, have you got it? Yeah, I've got the front. If it might try to roll to the passenger side though. It's a bit of a balancing act without a gear. Around the outside of the clutch there's just 6 12mm bolts. Clutch. To get the flywheel off, undo the opposite ones, same as you undo or do up a wheel. They're going to be tight, and this is going to be heavy as fuck, so just be really careful not to drop it on yourself. It's pretty warm too because we drove all the way over it. Anyway, yeah, rattle gun off. Well, they're tight. Well, that's that. Anyway, I got a bolt in the back of the block, and a screwdriver or a lever into the teeth, and I'm gonna undo them just with the normal ratchet.
But that has been in there for 10 years.
How much do you bench press, bro? Oh, approximately 700 foot-pound. With one hand. When this comes off, it's going to be really, really heavy.
Sure?
Yeah. So after that lengthy process of pulling the gearbox out, it's got the flywheel off, clutch completely out. So the flywheel is very, very heat damaged. It's got a whole lot of hot spots in it, as does the clutch, and there's not much left of that. So that is getting frisbeed in the bin. This, however, has to go to an engineer shop and get the face machined. If you just chuck your new clutch in, then it's gonna fuck itself pretty quick. And also another garage trick that people try and do when they're being cheap is get some sandpaper and sand it down. That's not a good idea because it has to be perfectly uniform the whole way around. Costs like $100 or something to get it machined. So after you've just gone through the massive effort of pulling that out, spending $600 or $700 on a clutch, spend another $100, get it machined, and it'll last a lot longer.
And feel a lot better.
And it'll drive better.
It won't shudder.
Yeah. So that is a must. You can't just do it with sandpaper. You can't do it with a die grinder. However, there's heaps of ways on the internet you'll find to do it. It has to be properly machined at a workshop.
Yep.
So we're going to come back in a couple of days when that's done. This is Coco. She's helping today, no Ivor.
No Ivor.
No Ivor in this video.
This one's not quite as crazy as Ivor.
So Lewis, well, your lights are doing some weird things to the camera. That's not what I was going to say. What's over here?
That's a an ongoing, very, very long-term project.
Trippy. What's in it? 2J?
Yeah, 2J. Yeah.
2J twin turbo.
Yeah, that's the plan.
If you know about engines, you'll realise that is not a 2J twin turbo. If you don't, then it's got making 600 horsepower.
Yeah.
Trippy might be on the channel later in life. Don't know what Lewis is not sure what he's doing with it yet.
Yeah, it started out as a full rebuild of the whole lot.
Started as a body swap, didn't it? Because of rust.
Yeah, yep. The old body was very, very well hidden, all the rust in it. And I started pulling bits off it to paint chassis and... Yeah.
And just never really stopped pulling bits off.
And, yeah.
Now putting it back together. And, yeah. That may be on the channel eventually.
One day.
Maybe. It's been more than the next day when I said it was going to be. But I've got this back. Nice and shiny, machined. So I'm going to chuck the gearbox back in. Got to change the thrust bearing. And I'm going to show you how to change a spigot bearing.
With a very fancy tool.
So when you sit in your car and you take your foot off the clutch and it starts making like a rattly noise, a lot of cars do it before the clutch is actually wrecked. It goes away when you put your foot on the clutch. That's this bearing buggered. So that's what it's supposed to sound like, nothing. And that's what they sound like when they're on their way out. But if that's noisy in your car, doesn't mean you need to replace the clutch, because it is a pretty big job. Just get rid of a noise that doesn't really matter anyway. Well, it matters if that explodes, but that's different.
And you'll know all about it if it explodes.
Yeah.
And you put a little bit of anti-seize on the...
Yeah. Okay. Now that this is off, some of them have little clips. Hilux ones just pull off. Clean this all up smooth and put a bit of grease on there and a little bit of grease on here. It's got some little slits that it sits in. Feed it back in there. And it's clicked on. And if it does that and comes off, obviously you've stuffed it up. But that is ready to go on the car. Tap with a hammer, don't hit the black bit because that's where the bearing is. Before you go through the trouble of lifting this thing up there, make sure you put a double Loctite on the ends of all the bolts.
Just don't drop it on yourself.
Yeah, there's no try, just don't drop it on yourself.
As Yoda would say, there is no try.
Okay, so you have to tension these, whether you do them on whatever car you own, they've got to be tensioned. And for a manual full drive Hilux, it's 145 Newton meters. So can we go?
The flywheel's pretty much in the middle.
Okay, so put the clutch plate on with your alignment tool. This can go both ways, but it will only work one way. If you put it on backwards, you're going to be pulling the gearbox back out again. And so some cars, so the big side, some cars it hits on the flywheel bolts, so it's obvious which way it goes. This one it doesn't, but that is the way it goes. The big side faces towards the gearbox.
And to clarify, this is a 2010 manual diesel, well obviously manual,
No.
manual Hilux with a...
Yeah, this will be the exact same for any N70 or KUN26 Hilux.
And probably the Prados too?
Probably the Prados. I don't know if they have a dual mass flywheel or not, but you can, it's pretty easy to put them on backwards if you don't know what you're doing, and then you go to drive your car and you can't drive your car. So put that up there. Put that off. Hit it onto the dowels a bit. Once you've got two on there, opposite ones, because that's as pulled as close as it's going to get. Pull it out and just have a look to see if it's actually in the middle. Yeah, the plastic ones can sometimes be a bit out. Yeah. If you have a metal one, it's never going to be wrong. Before you go try and put the gearbox in, put the it into A gear, so just put a screwdriver in that little bit there and until it clicks. So that's in a gear. Now I can put it in. So this is the difficult bit if you're doing it on the ground. If you're doing it on a hoist, this is no drama.
Come forward.
Now that's in there, it's 2 bolts holding it, done up tight. You need to have them done up tight before you can move the jack to the back so you can get a bit more access. Just put all the bell housing bolts back in. I need that long extension again. And then we'll move on to the next thing.
Almost on.
Is it starting?
The starter motor
Started the starter motor bolt.
I have started and I am tightening.
So you're at the start of the starter motor, starting the bolt.
Oh, I'd say I was at the end of the starter,
You're at the end
finishing
of
the
start,
bolt.
Finishing the started bolt.
Yeah, so you're a bit late with your tricky.
So before you fully bolt the starter motor on, that one bolt that goes backwards into from the engine to the gearbox instead of the other way also holds a mount for the slave cylinder. So you got to put that on before, or you don't gotta, but put it on before you fully tighten it. Otherwise you have to undo it again. Everything is in. Now I'm just going to jack the gearbox up a bit and put the drive shafts in, followed by the crossmember.
Now we've got the gearbox in, drive shafts bolted in, we're going to put the crossmember up. And a little tip, make it a lot easier to get these in, is you hit these with a hammer outwards, open it up a little bit, and you can slide it up on in there. So let's do that.
Why is there still so much mud falling out of this? So now we're completely finished underneath. Just going to put the gear sticks back in.
Well, we hope we're finished underneath.
Yeah. They go back in the exact same way that they came out, but backwards. Just push and turn.
Maybe.
This one can be a little bit trickier because you've got to get it in the right spot in that little spring. Got to get the full drive in the right spot in that spring, so it can be a little bit tricky to get in there. So that's how to change the clutch in a kun26 Hilux. Basically the same procedure for most four-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive cars. Things will be in slightly different spots, but it's basically the same. We're going to go for test drive and show you that it actually works, but Lewis has been doing some other things to his engine, so we can't actually start it. But that's how you change a clutch. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and check out the rest of the channel. So Lewis got his car running.
It's running.
So we can go for a drive, but first got to adjust the clutch pedal. So when you put your foot on the clutch, the engagement point where it starts to come compared to how far it is off the floor. If it's right on the floor, you didn't stuff up changing the clutch. If it's right up here, you didn't stuff up. So don't freak out if you go for a drive and it feels shit still. You've got to adjust the pedal so that it engages at about the middle of the travel. And the way you do that is under the dash here, where the slave cylinder or muff cylinder push rod bit comes through the firewall. Loosen that 12mm nut and turn the rod with your fingers to get the pedal to come up a little bit. You just do it just keep doing it, repeat it, check it, repeat it, check it. Just keep doing that until you get it in the perfect spot. So I've adjusted it so that it engages halfway through the pedal travel. Now we're going to go for a drive to prove that it actually works. Proving that it works.
That pedal feels so much nicer.
We are moving backwards. Well, reverse works.
Reverse works.
Does forwards work?
Is this the bit where I told them I drove it like across town? To
You
your
reverse
house?
it all the way across town?
Yeah,
He would be implicating people.
Okay.
You're listening to my storybook.
Anyway, that's how you replace the clutch. What's that light doing? Nah. That's how you do a clutch.